What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden. Glad to have you guys back here for the show as we get rocking and rolling on the Georgia and Ball State recap, or review is generally what I call these episodes. Glad to have everybody here as we get into things. Listen, Dogs on top again, 2-0 starting the season. Great way to start off the season. You can't ask for better than a couple of wins on the season, because there's some teams in this country right now that cannot say that they are 2-0. There are some teams that can say they're 2-0 or 1-1. Some teams can say they're 0-2, but the Dogs get to say that they're 2-0, which we are fired up about. Not necessarily the biggest competition on tap this week. Obviously, we know that we were supposed to be in Norman, Oklahoma last season when we were coming into this season. We knew that we had Oklahoma on the stage for game 2. I've seen a lot of complaining about Georgia's schedule. I've seen a lot of people, not only Georgia fans, but other fan bases, of course, that really want to complain and say, hey, Georgia's playing Ball State in week 2. This doesn't seem fair. Again, Georgia had Oklahoma scheduled in that. Not our faults that got changed up. Is what it is. Regardless, Dogs take care of business, 45-3 in this football game. So I was excited to see that. One of the other things that I was excited to see, that Georgia extends a school record 19-game winning streak, and that's now 29 consecutive regular season victories. They are now 31-1 over the last 32 games, including 2 back-to-back national championships. So that is pretty awesome there for the Dogs, and they were rocking and rolling from the get-go of this game. Did things start off slow? Because that's the question that everybody wants to bring up every single time we get into things. Things did start a little slow for the first quarter. It was 0-0 by the end of the first quarter, so you can't sit here and say, oh, I think things were rocking and rolling pretty good. Things started slow again, which everybody was concerned about, and then they didn't. It went from really kind of slow to starting to all of a sudden, my goodness, hello, Georgia, we're here. We're on fire. And I want to start off by saying this. For the people who were saying, man, it's so slow, I hate that they started this way. Georgia had the ball, I think, 2 possessions total in the first quarter. Ball State did a very good job of keeping the ball out of Georgia's hands. Georgia drove down the field on their first possession. That first drive that Georgia had the ball, drove right down the field, missed the field goal, came away with no points off that first possession. Second possession, we ended up not driving the field, and I think occasionally that's going to happen where we don't drive the field. The problem was, though, we drove the field at the beginning, didn't get points off of it, didn't drive it the next time, so it looked like we started even slower. But again, Georgia took off in that second quarter, blasting 31 points, which we're going to get into it. Some of the injury updates that I did want to run through, kind of updating on some players that did play and even some that didn't. Kendall Milton, we got to see a lot more of him in this football game, which I was very glad to see. Again, the running backs is starting to kind of be something I'm curious about, because we're just not really – we don't look like the Georgia of old when it comes to the running backs, and I want to kind of see that get back into shape. Kendall got the most carries on the team but did not have the most yards on the running back position, but – it was still good to see him back and getting back healthy. Again, like I said, I didn't expect us to see Dejon Edwards, and he did not show up in this football game. Not surprising. I will be excited to see him hopefully show up South Carolina this week, which is what we've got on tap coming up. So Dejon didn't play. Smile-minded, and we saw him in the game. Kamari Lassiter, we knew that Lab McConkey was going to be out. He's battling a back injury. Again, I'll probably say this every week just to kind of reiterate it. Don't know when Lad's going to be back. Kirby doesn't know this either. Again, I kind of expect this to be a longer, drawn-out system, kind of like it's been in years past with a couple of guys who we've been curious about seeing that we didn't see for an extended period of time. We've had a couple of guys who have been hurt, and we're like, all right, well, when are we going to see A.D. Mitchell back? And we wait until the end of the season, and all of a sudden he shows back up. A George Pickens, when he was hurt, you never even saw a quarterback for Rice and J.T. Daniels show back up on the field. So there was a lot of that was going on. And I feel like, unfortunately, this may be some of the same with Ladd, and it's not his fault. He's just battling a back injury. I would be surprised if we see him back for South Carolina, but not upset if we did, But I think that's just a process that we're just going to have to go through. I hate not seeing Ladd out there, but I love seeing the guys stepping up who have been stepping up, which we're going to talk about. Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saint was also bad. One thing that I have not seen an update on, I've not been paying a lot of attention today, is the update on Javon Bullard. We knew that he went out after that first possession. and he had a boot on the sideline for the rest of the game. So I don't know. I know when I saw the post-game presser, Kirby had said he's not sure. Obviously, he's out, but don't know the extent of the injury. Seemed like he sprained his ankle. So I'm just not really sure on that. And whatever I see, I'll be sure to kind of pass word along on there too. So didn't see a lot else other than maybe Blasky, the one of the offensive linemen, too. He was out coming into this game that we didn't know about. But for the most part, I think that's pretty much everybody on the injury list, unless something has happened today or beyond recording this that I don't know about, which is always possible, but just kind of keep an eye out around some of the other things. Well, glad to have you guys here. I appreciate you being here on the show today. If you guys don't mind, if you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button as well. I greatly appreciate it. Enjoy getting this visual content, out to you guys. And wherever you guys are listening on podcasts, make sure you rate and review it. Let's get into the Georgia versus Ball State review. I have to make sure I get it right this time as we go through it here. Here we go. So, Georgia, first thing, Dawgs defense dominant again. Another year of showing Georgia. Listen, I know it's Ball State. I know it's not a huge team in UT Martin in week one. But regardless, when you're playing these smaller teams, I want to see the defense. I want to see the entire team in general be elite. And Georgia's defense has shown through 2 games so far, easy-ish opponents is just flat out the way that it is. Easy opponents, but Georgia has kept them out of the end zone with regards to last week's touchdown, since that's what it's called and that's what it's going to go down as for UT Martin, has done a good job to keep the teams that they are playing out of the end zone more often than not. 10 points is what Georgia's given up on the season so far. Again, easier opponents, but that defense absolutely stifling. So the first half of this game, really simple here. We had an explosion of offense and an explosion of offense is the way I want to say it, but then a just strangling of defense through the entire game, but especially in the second quarter. In the second quarter alone, Georgia's defense did not give up any points, obviously, only allowed 22 yards in it. The offense of Ball State goes 0-3 in third down drives, 1 for 8 in pass completions, and had 3 turnovers. All 3 turnovers in the second half of this game, or the second quarter of this game, happened there in that second quarter, and all 3 of which were interceptions as well. Malachi Starks got one. Chaz Chambliss got one. Crazy one. And even Tyke Smith was just awesome to see. Anytime you get Tyke in there, it's just really exciting to me. So Dawgs defense absolutely stifling, especially in that second quarter. And it was a good time for it to come with Georgia really being kind of slow, getting things going offensively in the first quarter. Well, defensively, they had a lot of help on their side. One, from the interceptions that they had, putting them in better field position made a big difference in this game. So that was one thing that I was really excited to see that Georgia was doing in the game. Let me make sure I got my stuff pulled up here. I was really excited to see Georgia do that. But then, again, in that second quarter, things really turned up for Georgia offensively too. Again, we talked about it off the top, kind of slow getting things going. But in the end, Georgia really kind of got things moving along in this game. One thing that I really wanted to see in this game was I wanted to see guys that are going to start to step up in key positions that have been missing. A lot of this offensively, kind of in those wideout spots where we're not seeing it, really more in the running back room, and we still haven't necessarily seen that step up, with exception to a couple of guys who have slid in there kind of in a running back spot. Dylan Bell did that offensively for Georgia in this game, and that was an awesome thing to see. Offensively, Georgia put up 386 total yards, not as much as we put up against UT Martin the week before. 287 of those yards come through the air, but this was the big one to me. Only 99 yards on the ground. Not the end of the world that Georgia only put up right at 100 yards on the ground, but you would like to see this number kind of get a little bit better, especially because we're about to come into SEC football play. And even if it's not necessarily the highest caliber SEC team, which I'm not going to say that South Carolina isn't. I don't think they look like what we thought that they would look like at the start of this season, considering how they ended last year. I put a lot of dominance for South Carolina on how they ended the season and a lot on their positives without really taking into an account of the negatives they had throughout the season, leading up to the positives at the end of the season. So that's kind of, I'm not going to say that they're a top-tier SEC team in an SEC conference alone that seems really down right now. But regardless, it's SEC football play, and it's going to get better as you start to get into it. South Carolina's not necessarily going to be a bad football team, but their defense is going to look at the fact that you are getting all of your yards through the air right now, and you cannot run the rock. And they're going to do everything they can to make you one-dimensional, make you have to throw the ball, and we're going to defend against that. So I still want to kind of see more production out of that running back room. Again, not having DeJohn in there, I think, does make a little bit of a difference. But it was nice to see Dylan Bell kind of jump in there. Carson Beck's ending stats, 23 for 30, 283 yards, 2 touchdowns on the night. Does have 1 interception, which was a tip ball, but even a couple of the interceptions that Ball State threw as well were just funky. I mean, one goes off the back of the guy's leg. I think that was the one that Chaz actually ended up picking up. So that is one thing that, it's unfortunate when you have an interception like that really didn't necessarily have to be. I think the worst interceptions is the ones that it literally goes off of the wideout's hands and into somebody else. It's like, my goodness, those are the worst. When we should have had a catch, if not a touchdown, turns into an interception. But one big thing that I noticed in this, we're having some pretty, I'm not going to say serious, we're having some pretty rough issues blocking on the perimeter with these wideouts that are in there. Some of these younger guys and these guys who are still trying to step up in these positions, we're having issues blocking downfield and on that perimeter. So when we're starting to get to the outside, whether it's a run game or what, a lot of these defenders are shedding those blocks off of these wideouts, and they're making open field tackles or just tackles in general that we should be able to gain more yardage on, but we're not, because we're not blocking very well in the perimeter. So that's one thing I want to see kind of step up, but that was an issue that we had in this game. Again, offensive explosion in that second quarter. Georgia ends up absolutely blowing up, 31 points. We had 235 of our 386 total yards. All came in the second quarter, or really the first half of this game. 153 yards of that come through the air, and then the 3 interceptions happening there. But the explosion of the second quarter, 31 points. Georgia scored all of their points in the middle 30 minutes of this football game. 31 in the second, 14 in the third to make that 45, and then giving up the field goal there in the fourth quarter, which was, I mean, it's nice to see. Again, at the end of the first quarter when it's 0-0, you knew after last week you were going to see all the grumblings that you could handle, until Kirby finally decided, hey, he's got an interview going on the sideline for whatever reason going into the second quarter, now that they've started to do it like quarter by quarter with these interviews. Kind of interesting, but nonetheless, he gets asked, what are we looking at here? It looks like a slow start. And Kirby's like, we've had the ball twice. We've had 2 possessions, one of which we should have got points. We didn't. Second one, we didn't move the football. So 2 possessions, it's hard to score a lot. But then again, defensively helps you out a lot in that second part. And let's just look real quick at some of the keys that I was looking at this that I wanted to kind of point out as well. Offensively, I wanted Carson Beck to step up. I think he still did a good job of that. And then stepping up in these key positions, that was a big part of this. I wanted to see us step up in the key positions of this football game. And a couple of the guys did this, but we still got to do better on perimeter blocking. Then defensively create turnovers and don't get lazy. This is a big part of this, because in this game, Georgia ended up 3 interceptions. So the defensive turnovers was perfect. We knew coming into this game, Ball State gave up a lot of interceptions, or a lot of turnovers last week, I think all of which were interceptions then as well. They did the same thing this week. Gave up 3 to Georgia as well, which was really nice to see for us, and it worked out perfectly as a key to the game. And we didn't get lazy. In the end of the game, we didn't give up a touchdown. We gave up a field goal. They got in good position. Couple of times they kind of drove down trying to get in a good position, but Georgia was able to hold them out defensively. Not only to me as a fan and most fans that are listening and watching this, we hate when we get our later string guys in and a team scores on us. But they take just as much pride in it as we do, keeping a team out of the end zone and off the scoreboard, preferably, but mainly just out of the end zone in general. And Georgia's defense did really good at that. 6 different dogs end up with touchdowns on this night. 1 punt return. Mekhi Muse, my goodness, this dude's absolutely blowing up. Had a 69-yard punt return, which was awesome. All of the guys getting touchdowns. Dylan Bell with a touchdown. That one coming on the ground. again, that was a big deal here. He ran the rock really effectively for Georgia, even when lining up in that running back position. Cash Jones had a receiving touchdown. Completely opposite. You got a wide receiver who's getting a rushing touchdown. You got a running back who's getting a receiving touchdown, and a beautiful pass off the right side there to Cash Jones for the touchdown. Mekhi Muse, again, getting the punt return, 69 yards. That's 3 different ways of getting a touchdown. They're really the only 2 ways we didn't get a touchdown was a pick six or a scoop and score or a kick return, I guess, technically. But we got a touchdown 3 of the 5 possible ways that you could get, maybe 6 possible ways that you could get a touchdown. Kendall Milton got one on the ground, Roderick Robinson as well, and then Marcus Rosemary-Jackson getting back in on the action and also getting a touchdown in that way too. It was good to see. Again, Kendall Milton not getting the most yardage, but did get the most carries in this game at 18 yards, had the touchdown. Roderick Robinson touched the rock 6 times, 38 yards, a touchdown. Dylan Bell touched it 3 times for 28 yards and a touchdown. And then let's see, on the receiving category, this was the strange stat. Kendall did end up with a couple of catches for 9 yards, but Dylan Bell, a couple catches, 16, couple for Cash with a touchdown at 32, 1 for C.J. Smith for 16 yards. Dominic Lovett had a couple of good catches in this one. 29 yards is what he ends up with. Oscar Delp had a big day, 50 yards. Arian Smith, a couple of catches, 50 yards as well. Ra Thomas, 34 yards. So the ball really got spread out. This is one, again, going back to the keys to the game, Carson Beck and stepping up in these key positions. This is what I wanted to see as far as our wideouts. Let's see these guys step up. And looking at receiving here, with exception, or running back-wise, you got really 2 guys out of the running back room getting catches here, Kendall and Cash, but then Dylan Bell, a wide receiver, C.J. Smith, wide receiver, Dominic Lovett, wide receiver, Mekhi Muse, wide receiver, Oscar Delp, tight end, but then you get Arian Smith, Ra Thomas, Marcus Rosemary-Jackson. You get Pierce Sperling in there as another tight end, and then Brock Bowers, this was the odd one, only 1 touch, 31 yards. Don't think Brock's been feeling all that good. I don't know if it's a sickness or if Brock's just really, we talked about that first game. He's battling adversity and still made sure to stay on the field and didn't want to get off the field. He wanted to be on the field playing football for his team, and he stepped up big last week and helped us in that way. But I'm wondering if it didn't hurt him a little bit this week, coming into this game. I think he's been a little dinged up, and I think this week was just a little bit too much for him. I don't know. I did not listen to the presser and hear what he had to say on Brock, but it was strange to see him only get 1 touch for 3 yards in this game, and we didn't see a lot out of him after that. So that is one kind of thing to maybe kind of keep an eye on. But a lot of guys getting touches in this. So we did step up in the keys, therefore the keys to the game, spreading the ball out to these wideouts. Now I want to see that step up happen in the running back room because I am a little bit curious about that. So my prediction on it did end up being 52-3. The final ends up 45-3. And I'm not going to lie to you. I was sitting there going, hey, can I just get I'd love to see another touchdown here at the end of this, and let's see if Georgia can't really kind of take off with this even more. I was really excited to see that possibly happen, and it didn't happen. We come within a touchdown of it. If Georgia had scored that touchdown and I got it perfectly, would have been really exciting. I'll look back through Instagram, Twitter, all of the pages, and see if anybody got this score prediction right and make sure I give you guys a shout-out. I forgot to do that before getting to it. So that's something that we'll get to coming up. The AP poll did come out earlier. This is one thing I probably should have talked about earlier, but completely forgot to pull it up too. The AP poll did come out earlier. Georgia does remain the top of the AP poll. When I look at some of these other rankings, for whatever reason, ESPN FPI comes out every week with that football power index. And I'm really confused by this ESPN analytics page and why it shows this. We're going to get to some of the other games around the country as well, but anybody watching this or listening to this, you already know Texas beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Alabama is now a 1-1 football team. But what I'm confused by is the ESPN FPI ranking still has Alabama at first. And I don't know why. I really don't understand how that analytic has it there. I don't see it offensively, don't see it defensively, so I really don't understand why they're in that position. And it kind of begs, for me at least, what is it that somebody at ESPN has put in that is keeping Alabama in that position? I don't know, but I'm pretty curious about it. to be honest with you. But that is what it is. Georgia at the top of the AP poll. Following behind them is still Michigan at second. FSU does jump up into that third spot. Then I do believe it's USC, I think, at 4. Texas, I think, comes in that 5 spot. And then down at 6, I think it's Ohio State. I don't have it here in front of me, but I think that's kind of how it goes. Alabama falls down all the way to that 10th spot. I put up a graphic earlier. Couldn't get it to pull up on the screen for you guys here, but this is the top 5 that I have for this week. Just because, hey, everybody's entitled to an opinion, and this one's mine. Georgia, or mine, at least. Dog Talk top 5. I got Georgia at 1. I think FSU is good enough to be second. They've proven against LSU and even against inferior opponents this weekend that they are an elite football team, putting up a lot of points, and their defense is good as well. I got FSU at second, and I've got Texas at third. I think Texas is good enough right now to be considered that third position. Again, didn't necessarily play the greatest against Rice last week. They played great against Alabama, really good, considering how many people just expected Alabama to be the top again. And they still there's a lot of football left to play. We're not going to doubt them. We're not going to put them out. I don't believe in them, but it doesn't matter what I think. It all matters what happens on the field. But regardless, I think Texas has shown enough to be that number 3 team in the country. Some of that is because Michigan still looks decent offensively, and defensively they still look really good. They're not giving up many points against these smaller teams, but they're not scoring a lot. And I'm not attributing all of that to Jim Harbaugh not being on the sideline. You know, him sending his entire family and their uncles in to coach for him. I'm not attributing that to that. I think coordinators can handle that enough on their own. So I've got Michigan at 4, and then give me USC at 5. A lot of that's because, Ohio State's offense just is not what it is. Honestly, if Ohio State returns C.J. Stroud this year from last year, I would probably put Ohio State second, like running right there at the possibility of running back for a national championship in hopes for that this year. But they don't have him, so that offense is still reeling and trying to figure some things out there. So that's what we've got for the keys to the game. That's what we've got for the Georgia Ball State review. Score prediction 52-3, ends 45-3. So pretty close on it. Now let's kind of get into some of the other games around the country. Some of the other ones, we talked about it. You got a few that are scrolling across the bottom of the screen there. Notre Dame and NC State we thought would be a pretty good one, and it was for a little while, and then Notre Dame really started to pull away with that one, 45-24. One of the big ones over there in Boulder, Colorado, was Nebraska traveling over to Colorado. Let's see how real this Deion Sanders team is, and they were 14-36. Colorado rolling. I should have said that back the other way, 36-14. Anyways, Ole Miss traveling to Tulane. This was another game I wanted to see. Hey, let's see what Ole Miss is made of. Pretty tight ball game back and forth, and then late in the fourth quarter, Ole Miss really taking away with it, 37-20. We've already talked about Texas and Alabama. We'll talk about it a little bit more here in just a second. The late night was Auburn at Cal, and Auburn, not really a pretty game. I'm going to be honest with you. I went to sleep by the end of this one. Auburn was down like 10-7. And I was like, all right, this is too late for me to be staying up for a game that, quite frankly, does not matter to me in the end with regards to them playing. But it is one of my weekly picks, so that was one of the reasons I wanted to see it. But ends 10-14 in the end. Really kind of sloppy game from what I have heard from some Auburn fans and some looking at the score in general. Back to the biggest game in the country was 11 Texas traveling to number 3 Alabama, and Texas taking care of business 34-24. Coming into the fourth quarter, Alabama had the lead in this football game, and then when they took the lead, I was like, yeah, that might be enough for Alabama to be able to hold on to this. But Texas said, no, sir, we're not giving up, and they continued to fight back, and then took the lead and never gave it back. From that point on, really good football game. I've told you guys on this podcast, if they didn't have Bryce Young last year, they lose that football game. Probably lose 4 games. It is a lot of the reason that I have Alabama going 9-3 this season. At this point, I don't know if LSU is going to beat them. LSU doesn't look like a team that can beat them. A lot of that, I think, is because of Brian Kelly. You know, we kind of said coming into this, hey, maybe he's a pretty good guy. The dude will throw his team under the bus at the drop of a hat. So I don't know what the deal is with him. But I don't know that he can beat Alabama again this year. The only good thing about it is, I guess, no, that game's in Tuscaloosa as well, so LSU's going to have their hands full trying to win it there. But Alabama's offense, they've got some weapons out there, but that O-line, it can be as big as it wants to be. It's not stopping anybody. It's not at all. And if you have a good offense playing against that defense, they can score. Quinn Ewers showed that you can beat Alabama's defense deep, and they did all night long. Really good game, 34-24. Texas rolling away with that. Some of the other ones around the country as well. Oklahoma State over Arizona State, 27-15. Arkansas beating Kent State 28-6. Utah and Baylor, this is one of the other ones we talked about. I wanted to see, all right, this is kind of a game. This is a put-up. Let's see what Utah truly is, and let's see if Baylor losing last week to Texas State was a fluke or are they really a team. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I really answered any of those questions because Utah played Florida in week 1 and thumped Florida pretty good. And Baylor, again, losing to Texas State in week 1. So it was kind of one of those, okay, Baylor's not real good. Utah, it seems like they're pretty good. They're the number 12 team in the country. And they take this game to overtime. I believe it went to overtime. Either which way. This game ends 20-13. Utah barely on top. And the question went from, let's see if Baylor's really not that good, to all of a sudden, is Florida so bad that Utah really is overranked at 12? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Baylor played really good at home. Almost won this football game. It took 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, so I was wrong. It was not an overtime game. 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, basically, or just over it, and Utah scored 2 touchdowns in that time to win this game, 20-13. But before that, they were losing coming into the end of this game. And Baylor had a chance at the end of this one, but it didn't matter. Utah ends up winning it by a field or a touchdown. But again, I don't think it answered my question: is Baylor actually pretty good? And it was a fluke against Texas State. As much as it made me wonder, maybe Utah is overranked. I don't know what they're ranked now. I don't have it pulled up here. But just an ugly game overall. UCF barely squeaking by Boise State, 18-16. I think that one ended on a field goal there for Gus Malzahn. Some of the other ones, I've got a ton pulled up on this page right here, which usually I like to limit it down to some games. Again, Florida State 66-13 over Southern Miss. Huge game there for FSU. Southern beating UAB 49-35. That's going to matter come week 4. Georgia taking on that same UAB team. Let's see how they can handle them. So shout out to Georgia Southern there. Iowa State in the most Iowa football game there was, and you could always expect it. Low scoring, 20-13. That one ends Iowa's way. Troy losing to Kansas State 42-13, and what an odd shift of a guy. I've never seen a guy shift across the football in my life, but that was a video that came up. One of the other big ones, Texas A&M and Miami. This is one I wanted to see. All right, well, let's see what Texas A&M is made of. Again, we're about to get to the weekly picks, but my goodness, Texas A&M I just don't think is a very good football team. Again, coming into this, I've told you guys I've got Auburn and I've got Texas A&M at the bottom of the West. I hope that they would win this weekend, mainly for a pick standpoint, but I don't know that Texas A&M is very good. And some of that is because this ends Miami 48-33. In the end, Miami really ended up taking away with it. For a little while, it was pretty close, but Miami pulled away late, and it wasn't like the atmosphere in that game should have really affected it because that stadium was like half empty or half full, whichever way you want to look at it. And Miami was still just kind of thumping Texas A&M. Texas A&M's defense really, really spotty, really spotty. Offensively, I think they can score. I do like Connor Wegman there, but defensively, I'm just not really seeing much from them. Again, they take the thump. Michigan over UNLV 35-7. Michigan State in some trouble there with the head coach, 45-14. Former Mel Tucker there for Georgia. Just not really good looking stuff there. We're going to wait and see more on that as we kind of go. One of the games I didn't realize either that Mississippi State took Arizona into overtime to beat 31-24. Missouri barely beating Middle Tennessee State 23-19. Again, this is just one of those years. I think the SEC, unfortunately, is just down, and that's kind of the way that it looks on this. I didn't realize that was that close. We talked about Notre Dame. North Carolina, App State. This was a really close one, and again, it took North Carolina two overtimes to win this one, 40-34. Again, North Carolina, a 17th ranked team. But again, coming into this one, App State beat Texas A&M last year. Don't know if that's really saying much, but this is a game you can't sleep on. If anytime you're playing App State, doesn't matter who you are. And North Carolina, they figured that out pretty quickly in this game. Oklahoma beating SMU 28-11. Penn State throttling Delaware 63-7. Air Force, here's a slow one. Air Force over Sam Houston State 13-3. Rice beat Houston in double overtime 43-41. Big win for JT Daniels. Cincinnati over Pitt 27-21. I know these are a lot of games that I'm kind of going through here. USC taking care of Stanford in the late game as well, 56-10. Oregon, Texas Tech, that one went down to the wire. That one's a lot tougher there for Oregon than I thought it would be, 38-30. Took them, I think, pretty late into the game to be able to take that game away. Tennessee, Austin Peay, we're just going to talk about it for a quick second. 30-13, Tennessee ends up winning this one at home. But let's not make the mistake. I tweeted this out as well. You want to look at a slow start. Look at that Tennessee-Austin Peay game, because at one point it was 6-3. Austin Peay was beating Tennessee late into the second quarter of that football game. Luckily, Tennessee ends up pulling away with it in the end. Again, Ole Miss over Tulane. Purdue, Virginia Tech, that was a good one, 24-17. Washington State, Wazoo upsetting Wisconsin 31-22. Wake Forest, unfortunately for poor old Dandy Vandy over there. Wake Forest 36, Vandy 20, the only other undefeated team. No, I guess there are still a couple undefeated teams in the SEC. And then Louisville taking care of Murray State. I think that was on Thursday, 56-0. Absolutely ended up thumping them. Again, don't have the weekly picks up on the graphic. Couldn't get it to pull up earlier, but I did have it pulled up at least on my other deal here so I could look at it. I took Georgia over Ball State. Georgia, that one happened 1-0. I took Ole Miss over Tulane 2-0. I'm looking really good on it. Thought I took Ole Miss in the points, but it turns out I took Texas A&M in the points, which was the wrong thing to do. So I start 2-0. Then I took Texas A&M over Miami -4. That didn't happen. So what do? I go 2-0. All of a sudden now I'm 2-2. I did take Auburn over Cal, but I took Auburn in the points 6.5. And unfortunately that one didn't happen. So end up on the week 3-3 overall, 8-5. So still a winning record, and we'll try to keep it that way as the rest of the season rocks on. But the good news is Georgia is a 2-0 football team. I'm looking forward to Georgia getting into a little bit tougher competition as we get ready to prepare for South Carolina coming up later on this week. That's what we will gear up for, is previewing that South Carolina-Georgia game at home, 3:30 CBS. Hang on. Let me turn this music down because we get some absolutely glorious music for basically the last time that we're going to hear it. I take that back. We all know the world's largest outdoor cocktail party is going to be at 3:30 as well, too. But we get to hear it. It's really weird hearing this sound and seeing a Big Ten game take place. I really don't know how to feel about it. But other than Gary Danielson always, talking about Alabama for pretty much anything. But it's going to be the last time we really get to hear that sound for Georgia, which is kind of a sad thing. But at the same time, we'll get over it. 3:30. South Carolina and Georgia coming up this coming weekend. Again, more competition, a little bit tougher. Should be a little bit tougher anyways. Looking forward to that one. We'll review later on this week. But if you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. If you guys want to support the show, Patreon.com/Dawg Talk. I greatly appreciate it. We'll check in with you guys later this week. Go Dogs.